How's it going, people? Rolly42 here. Today I just wanted to take this opportunity to talk to you about commitment and multiplayer games. Some of you may be wondering, Roller, what are you talking about? What do you mean by commitment? Well, when I say commitment, I'm talking about this little thing you require in order to enjoy most online multiplayer games properly. Because you see, back in the day, and this is something even I was well aware of, you didn't really have the majority of the elements you see in video games today, at least not in online games. You got into a multiplayer match, you played your game, you either won or lost the game, and you got to move on. At the turn of the 7th generation, there was a change. Video game developers started putting progression systems in their games, and as the years went on and on, the concept of video games as a service became a thing, where the developers turned their game into something with the same features as an MMO, with time events, season passes, battle passes, microtransactions, loot boxes, you mentioned. You think of it, it's happened. Now, what does all of this have to do with commitment? Well, you see, if you find yourself enjoying one of these multiplayer games a lot, or if you are curious about one video game and you want to enjoy it to its fullest, you're going to have to be committed to it. Because each time you don't play a game, you're gonna find yourself falling behind other players. You're gonna find yourself in a match where you're gonna be matched against players that are many levels ahead of you. On the worst case scenario, you're gonna be facing against players who pay the microtransactions that are going to give them an advantage over you, that are easily going to destroy you. And if anybody wants to argue that this doesn't really happen too often, it does actually happen. Because it's not just about microtransactions giving them an advantage or the leveling system giving them more power over you. It's just that by having a higher level displayed against you, that means these people had a lot more experience playing the game that you have. The playing field is a lot more uneven, and the only way to counterattack this kind of thing, you have to be committed to that certain game. Now, this, of course, has been one of my major gripes with the games lately. Of course, I've been warming up to multiplayer gaming a lot, thanks to my friends. They've been introducing me to some multiplayer games. I've been playing them with friends, and yeah, it does really make a difference playing a multiplayer game with your friends in a group, rather than simply playing with randoms, which usually leads to all the toxicity that people despise so much. Anyways, the point I am getting at is that with all this thing about commitment, all this need to be constantly playing a single game, we are getting to a point in the gaming industry where the multiplayer gaming market is getting saturated, especially with those so-called games as a service. Because just take a look around at the things we have right now, at least the games that are still somewhat active. You have Overwatch, you have Rainbow Six Siege, you have For Honor, we have Anthem, we have Apex Legends, PUBG, Fortnite, you have even Rocket League, you got Paladins. There's just so many games that have these same kinds of features. And it's reaching the point where players simply cannot afford to stick with one of these games, or at least too many of these games. And it's showing, really. Because we got games like Anthem and games like Fallout 76 starting to really suffer from it. I mean, sure, they are trying to recreate something that games like Rainbow Six Siege accomplished. I mean, if you guys remember, Rainbow Six Siege had a really bad launch. It had so very little players. In fact, many people were turned off from the game because they felt it was unfair that Rainbow Six Patriots was cancelled in favor of this multiplayer-only game. But Ubisoft put a lot of effort, and 1 year later the game is just fantastic, and they did this with For Honor, and they did this for Ghost Recon Wildlands too. Like, Ubisoft has been killing it with turning their games around. Now, what this means is that companies like EA have been trying really hard to recreate this. They released Anthem in a state that, while the game is not horribly bad, like it's not terrible per se, it is coming with the typical issues of launch day AAA online games. And it is also launching with the need of a roadmap, which means that the game as it is right now is not exactly worth it. Especially not with a game that is plagued with loading screen issues that at the time of this recording I don't think have been patched yet. It's coming in with some issues with the matchmaking where early game players can be matched into the final mission of the game, getting themselves effectively spoiled. We're getting into a gameplay loop where the gameplay loop is not exactly fun. It's not really spicing things up with a storyline or with something really worth looking at. Things like that. Then you take a look at a game like Fallout 76 where the same thing is happening. It's the typical trademark bugs that Bethesda is infamous for, but now it is on an online scale. It is a $60 game with microtransactions. It is facing the typical Bethesda bug issues with their buggy engine that really showcases their incompetence once again, except this time around the bugs are actually hindering other players. Fallout 76 may be one of the biggest dumpster fires in gaming history as of late, because even though it's been a long time since the game launched, more and more issues keep coming. And these once again highlight the problem with the game as a service. It highlights the problem with commitment. Because if your game is not meeting its full potential right from the start, or if its current roadmap is just not very good, then you're going to be losing players. You're going to be losing a lot of things. There is another good example. There is Overkill's The Walking Dead. They wanted to make this game as a service online game where they wanted to start expanding on it. They wanted to make this really cool addition to the Walking Dead universe. But instead what we got was a very lackluster game, and it got so lackluster that the publishers of the Walking Dead, you know, the owners of the comic series, the very creators of the IP itself, terminated their contract with Starbreeze, and now the game is just dead. Anybody who owns the game, of course, they can continue to play it, but the console versions have been cancelled, and of course the game itself has been taken off the store front. Like, it's no longer on Steam. What this means is that, of course, the game launched in a lackluster state. The game launched not very good. It even had a cringe-worthy reveal event, some launch event. I can't even make a whole video on it later if you want. But the point is that it failed to entice people. It failed to get enough people to commit to the game the same way other multiplayer-only games did. And that, of course, starts to become a problem. I want to bring one more example, because at this point I'm kind of started to ramble. You got Heroes of the Storm, a game by Blizzard. You got many games by Blizzard, where even though these games have been complete successes, not enough people have committed to it, and it came to a point where Blizzard themselves, or should I say Activision, have pulled the plug on them. It even got to the point where developers are getting fired left and right, even though the company as a whole is starting to get some really big record profits. But that is a kind of worms we're going to save for later, even though it still ties into the games as a service problem. In fact, you know what? I'm gonna make the point right now. The firing there also comes with the problem of games as a service. Why? Because Activision is getting so committed to the games as a service bubble that developers are no longer getting focused on making new games. They're just committing to expanding on the games they already released. And because they're no longer developing games on the same pace as before, they're not needing the developers anymore, and they're getting fired, and it's just a complete mess. Like I said, I'm gonna get more into it in another time. But yeah, I think you guys get the idea right now. If any of you thought the market was getting saturated when Call of Duty and its copycats were starting to take over the market, now you're looking at a saturation of the market in a completely different way. To the point where legitimately good single-player games are being hailed as true saviors of gaming, but you know what, I shouldn't really be surprised. Thanks to the games as a service bubble, and thanks to YouTubers trying to sensationalize everything for clicks, they got this false idea that single-player games are dying, but again, that one is for another topic. But anyways, I think I have said my piece. There is nothing wrong with games as a service on paper as a concept. In fact, it is something that if pulled off correctly can lead to legitimate greatness. But when you make too many games as a service, some of these publishers really should be reconsidering that maybe getting into this bubble is not going to work out too well, because you're gonna be facing players who are already committed to the games they are already establishing. And there is also the chance that players are already committed to enough games that they don't want to oversaturate themselves. And there are others who do not want to get committed to certain games because the higher level players are already destroying them. They discourage them from getting into the game because they're gonna be losing too easily. But yeah, like I said, I said my piece. It's kind of a shame that the market is getting saturated, but it is what it is. It is basically the flavor of the generation, like it happens with many of these. But yeah, that's all I had to say on the topic. What do you guys think about all of this? What do you think about games as a service? Do you think the market is getting saturated the way I'm feeling it? Or do you think I'm just exaggerating? Do you think there is still room for games as a service to be legitimately good? Let me know in the comments area. I always enjoy listening to feedback. You can agree with me, you can disagree with me. As for myself, that is going to be it for this video, so thank you very much for watching, and as usual, I'll see you all in the next one.